The dream of retiring at 30 is everywhere, but the version sold by internet gurus is often a dangerous oversimplification. They paint a picture where you buy a handful of stocks, set up an automated funnel, and spend the next 5 decades sipping drinks on a beach, while cash magically hits your account. In the real world, hands-off passive income is incredibly fragile, prohibitively expensive to acquire, and builds far slower than anyone is willing to admit. For the majority who actually cross the finish line of financial independence, the reality isn't zero work. It's a dynamic, evolving strategy of managed withdrawals and semi-passive projects. Today I'm going to deconstruct the math, the hidden hazards, and the complex psychology of life without a paycheck. If you assemble this machine incorrectly, you don't just lose your income, you lose your autonomy. Stick around for the second half because we're going to discuss a bizarre phenomenon. Why people with $3 million in the bank still experience a panic attack over a $5 coffee. It's a real psychological barrier. If you value deep dives that respect your intelligence rather than just shouting hype, hit that subscribe button. It's the best investment of your time today. In simple terms, living on passive income means your assets pay for your life so you don't have to sell your time. Generally, this falls into 2 buckets. The first is the cash flow model. Think dividends or rent. The second is the total return model, where you systematically sell off portions of a growing portfolio. People love to argue about which is superior, but the most resilient investors usually use a hybrid of both. If you've spent any time in the FIRE community, you've heard of the 4% rule. This is the gold standard derived from the Bengen study. It suggests that if you hold a balanced portfolio of stocks and bonds, you can withdraw 4% in your first year, adjust for inflation annually, and have a high probability of your money outlasting you for 30 years. The inverse of 4% is 25. This gives you the napkin math multiplier. Your target nest egg needs to be 25 times your annual expenses. Spend $50,000 a year, you need $1.25 million. Spend $100,000, you're looking at $2.5 million. But this isn't a law of physics, it's a historical probability. Recent analysis from firms like Morningstar warns that in a high-valuation, low-yield environment, 4% might be too risky. They've suggested safe withdrawal rates as low as 3.3% or 3.5%. That sounds like a minor tweak, but look at the numbers. If you need $50,000 a year, the jump from a 4% rule to a 3.3% rule means you need to save an extra $260,000 just to maintain the exact same lifestyle. And remember, in this model, you are betting that the remaining capital grows faster than you can consume it. The biggest trap in retirement math is the erosion of purchasing power. People think, I'll just live on $4,000 a month forever. But in 10 years, $4,000 won't buy the same life. At a modest 3% inflation rate, you'll need nearly double that amount in 20 years just to stay even. If your income is fixed, like a traditional bond or a non-indexed annuity, you are effectively taking a pay cut every single year. This is why equities are essential. They act as a natural hedge that historically outpaces the rising cost of living. What's the move? If you're building a withdrawal-based plan, you need a buffer. Don't plan for the best-case scenario. Plan for the mediocre one. Many experts now advocate for a 3.5% baseline with variable guardrails. You take 4% in the boom years and dial back to 3% when the market tanks. The math proves that flexibility in spending is 10 times more valuable than a slightly larger pile of cash. You might be thinking, Liam, I don't want to sell my shares. I want pure rent checks and dividends so I never touch the principal. It sounds like the ultimate safety net. But while the math of the stock market is tricky, the world of pure cash flow has a trap where people routinely underestimate costs by 50%. This is the golden goose model. You eat the eggs, but never the goose. The biggest error in real estate is confusing gross revenue with net income. Someone buys a property, rents it for $2,000, and thinks they have $2,000 in passive income. They don't. Once you subtract property taxes, insurance, maintenance, vacancy periods, management fees, and capital expenditures like a $15,000 roof every 2 decades, that $2,000 might only be $700 in actual profit. To replace a $50,000 salary, you don't need one house. You need 10, free and clear. At that point, you aren't a passive investor. You're a property manager with an expensive hobby. The psychological irony is that we often undervalue our own labor. If you spend 10 hours a week managing tenants or researching high-yield dividend traps, you aren't retired. You just bought yourself a different job. True passivity has a price tag, usually in the form of lower returns in exchange for professional management. The IRS might call it passive, but your calendar will say otherwise. The answer is balance. Most successful early retirees I know use a hybrid model, a core of low-cost index funds for long-term growth, layered with a small amount of cash flow to cover the basics like groceries and utilities. If the market crashes, the lights stay on without you having to sell your growth shares at a 30% discount. We've looked at income, but there is a variable 10 times more powerful than your ROI, your spending. People obsess over finding an extra 1% in yield, but I'll show you why cutting your expenses by 1% is worth double that in terms of freedom. Every $100 of monthly spending requires roughly $30,000 of invested capital to sustain it indefinitely. That $20 streaming subscription? That represents $6,000 of capital you have to keep locked away forever. When you view luxury through this lens, the price isn't the dollars, it's the years of freedom required to back it. A great metric to track is your passive FI ratio, your passive income divided by your expenses. If you spend $3,000 a month and dividends bring in $750, you are 25% free. Progress isn't linear. The first 20% is the hardest to get, but it's the most impactful. Once your assets cover your rent or mortgage, your entire risk tolerance shifts. You no longer work for survival, you work for fulfillment. The greatest enemy here is lifestyle creep. I've seen people hit their original goal of $1 million only to decide they need to because they want business class flights and a boat. If your spending rises in lockstep with your portfolio, you aren't getting free. You're just running on a faster treadmill. The winners are those who can freeze their standard of living. They decide what is enough and defend that number against their own ego. Focus on the gap, the space between what you earn and what you spend. That is where speed lives. Now for the most dangerous threat, sequence of returns risk. You can do everything right, quit your job, and still go bankrupt in 5 years depending on what the market does the day after you leave. This risk dictates that the order of your returns matters as much as the average. If the market drops 20% in your first 2 years of freedom while you are withdrawing money to live, you dig a hole so deep that the portfolio can never recover, even if a bull market follows. You are permanently depleting your capital base at the worst possible time. Imagine retiring with $1 million. Year 1, the market drops 20%. You have $800,000 left. You withdraw $40,000 to live. Now you have $760,000. Year 2, another 10% drop. You take another $40,000. In just 24 months, you've burned through nearly a third of your money. To get back to even, you would need a historic, record-breaking market run, but you have fewer capital soldiers left to participate in that recovery. This is where the nerve of the investor breaks. How do you kill this monster? You use a cash buffer or bond tent. Keep 2 to 3 years of living expenses in liquid cash or short-term bonds as you enter retirement. If the market crashes in year 1, you don't touch your stocks. You live off the buffer and wait for the recovery. Yes, holding that much cash slightly drags down long-term returns, but it's insurance against the worst-case scenario. It ensures you never have to sell a piece of your future just to buy a sandwich today. Finally, there is the hurdle nobody discusses until they hit it face first. What happens to your brain when the alarm clock stops? In the FIRE community, there is a massive difference between retiring from something and retiring to something. If you are just escaping a boss you hate, the euphoria will vanish in weeks. A year at the beach is an existential crisis. We derive status and utility from our work. Without challenges, the brain invents them. You'll find yourself obsessing over the lawn or arguing on the internet just to feel engaged. The most successful passive income earners don't actually stop producing. They just stop doing work they despise. They shift to optional work, volunteering, consulting on their own terms, or creative passion projects. The goal isn't sloth, it's total autonomy over your schedule. This leads to the choice between lean FI, minimalist freedom, and fat FI, luxury freedom. Lean FI is fragile and stressful. Fat FI takes twice as long to reach. The sweet spot for many is reaching a lean FI baseline for survival, then continuing to do some active work to fund the luxuries. This removes the pressure. You don't need the job to eat, so the job becomes a choice again. So, can you live off passive income? Yes. But forget about the magic pill. It is an ecosystem. You build a foundation of index funds, layer on semi-passive cash flow for stability, and maintain a cash buffer for the storms. But most importantly, keep your skills sharp and your plan flexible. The most secure people aren't those with the biggest pile of gold. They are those who can adapt their spending and income when the world changes. I want to hear from you. Are you a total withdrawal strategist or a cash flow believer? Tell me your freedom number in the comments if you're brave enough. If this gave you the reality check you needed, hit the like button. And for a look at how I personally structure my portfolio to manage these risks, watch this video on the screen now. See you in the next one.